There's just not enough Wegovy. But even if Novo Nordisk were to manufacture an enormous surplus of Wegovy, millions more will never get it. Whether due to short-sightedness or seeing obesity as a choice rather than a disease, many insurance companies outright deny coverage of medications for weight loss. As an endocrinologist at an academic medical center who specializes in treating metabolic diseases, including obesity and type 2 diabetes, I try to give all my patients the best possible care against these obstacles. But medical weight management has become an endurance sport for my patients and me.
That was Jody Dushay, an endocrinologist at the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center and assistant professor at Harvard Medical School. She's also the founder and director of Well Powered, a comprehensive wellness and weight management program. She was reading from her recent First Opinion essay on how the shortage of drugs like Wegovy and Ozempic is forcing her to make difficult decisions for and with her patients. After our break, we'll discuss the rise of GLP-1s and what they mean for physicians and patients alike, and we'll also talk to one of her patients, Laurie Brunner.
Right now, millions of Americans are making important decisions about their healthcare coverage for next year. United Healthcare offers a couple tips to help you during this open enrollment period. First, don't overlook specialty benefits like dental, vision, hearing, or wellness programs. Many health plans now offer incentives for exercising or for not smoking, and many Medicare Advantage plans offer gym memberships at no extra cost. Second, check your prescription benefits. Filling prescriptions at a participating network pharmacy or with home delivery may help you manage costs and get the most from your prescription coverage. For more tips, visit uhcopenenrollment.com.
Welcome to the First Opinion podcast. I'm Tori Bosch, editor of First Opinion. First Opinion is Stat's platform for interesting, illuminating, and provocative articles about the life sciences writ large, written by biotech insiders, healthcare workers, researchers, and others. Welcome, Jody and Laurie. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Jody, I want to start with you. How long have you been in weight management as a field, and what was it like before the new generation of drugs like Wegovy?
I finished my fellowship in 2008, and my clinical practice focused on mostly type 2 diabetes and metabolic complications of diabetes. Then over time, I started to see more patients for weight management, and my practice evolved pretty quickly. I would say after about 3 years, as soon as word got out that I was seeing patients for medical weight management, I got more referrals. And then as additional therapeutics became available, I got additional patients. I did do my research as a fellow on weight loss with actually the first in-class GLP-1 agonist called exenatide. And I was looking at women without diabetes and their weight loss responses to exenatide. So from there, my clinical practice followed my research. There were some other medications that were similarly used off-label, but when I started, there was just exenatide, and then that field grew. But it was very unconventional. I mean, really unheard of to use exenatide for weight loss without diabetes originally. It was approved for type 2 diabetes, and that was not the indication. So the landscape has changed dramatically at an accelerated pace since other GLP-1s have entered this class.
And what's the difference between those drugs and what we're seeing today?
A major difference is duration of action. So exenatide was, as I said, first in class, and that was a twice daily medication. There were 2 different doses, but it was either 5 milligrams taken twice a day or 10 milligrams taken twice a day. And then from there, it was novel that liraglutide was approved that was once daily, which was thought to be, pretty amazing. And then from there, the weekly formulations. So it really went from a major change was in terms of how often you had to take this medication. And at first, when the weeklies were available, there was this idea that, well, would it work as well?
And so just to be clear, all of these drugs generally are injectables. Is that correct?
There is one oral, which is an oral semaglutide. You don't hear that much about it. The trade name is Rybelsus, and it is an oral semaglutide that is dosed once daily. There is another strength of oral semaglutide that is under active research right now. But otherwise, they are all injected.
Great. And now, when did you start realizing that things were changing, that there is all this hype around Wegovy, Ozempic, and how did it change your practice?
Several things happened at once, including, well, the approval of Wegovy, of course, and then social media, and then shortages. And then with the shortages, in addition to causing a lot of frustration with not being able to get it, it also increased demand. So there were shortages and then there was more demand. And then, so that was, I think, the first inflection point was the first round of shortages, which coincided, not surprisingly, with a lot of the attention it was getting in the lay press and in social media.
Now, Laurie, I'd like to bring you in. How did you first interact with Jody?
This probably takes a little bit of explaining. I have a long history with the bariatric program. I had lap band surgery done in 2004, and it was initially quite successful. I had lost about 100 pounds, and I was doing well for a while. And eventually, weight started to creep back on over the years, especially when I went through several years of some profound stress. Things sort of came to a head. I want to say it was about a year and a half ago to 2 years ago. I was having a lot of issues with the feeling of globus sensation, which is that feeling that you've got a lump in your throat that won't go away. And it turned out that had a lot to do with acid reflux. And so I went through a bunch of testing. I did a GI series. They said, wow, your band is really, really tight. We need to take the fluid out. So they did that. And that alleviated the it's like unbelievably awful reflux. I mean, I was waking up having aspirated acid in my sleep. It was really terrible. That, though, sort of put me on a path toward thinking about whether I needed to consider taking the band out and what I was going to do in the event that this came to pass. So while I was trying to figure things out, there was other stuff going on. I was diagnosed with breast cancer in December of 2018. I went through 4 months of chemotherapy and 30 rounds of radiation in 2019. Developed lymphedema shortly afterward. And I've also been in a trial of Kisqali at Mass General during that time. So there's been a lot that's been happening for me medically. I was forced into menopause by chemo and then by endocrine therapy. I've been on ovarian inhibitors and aromatase inhibitors, and that makes you gain weight. I mean, there's really, I think, no way around that. So I kind of at first just decided that whatever, I was grateful to be alive. This is my life. I'm not going to sweat it too much. But then I found out that there was the possibility of having my lymphedema addressed also at Beth Israel. And so I got myself referred there and started trying to get considered for the surgery, only to find that there is a BMI cutoff. And I was above that. And the BMI cutoff is 35. I thought, okay, well, I need to try to start losing some weight. I mean, I wouldn't mind losing some weight to get back further, to where I had gotten years ago. But after everything I'd been through, my body was just not having it. I think that it had just been through so much, and it was just like, nope, we're done. Not taking any more changes from you. We need stability. Here it is. So that was really frustrating. That was when I thought, well, maybe it's time to consider medication. And that was when I started seeing Jody.
When you started seeing Jody, had you heard about this new sort of generation of weight loss drugs? And did you and Jody have a conversation about them?
I had heard about them. I actually first heard about them from my PCP, who suggested that there were a couple of options that I could try for medication, one being something like Wegovy, and the other being the combination of phentermine and topiramate. So that when I came to see Jody, we talked about those.
Well, I don't want to pry too much. Can you tell me a little bit about what those conversations were like? And Jody, I'd be interested to hear from you after Laurie tells us. I'm just curious how the conversations go, what some of the considerations were as you discussed them.
Mm. Well, I went in and I told her my long story about how I came to be in her office. And she agreed that medication might help me get to a point where I could be eligible for this surgery. And so we talked about the different kinds of side effects for each type of drug. And, I kind of took a little time to read them on my own and think about, okay, which side effect profile can I live with more? I was a little nervous about the idea of injections at first, but I thought, well, I can probably live with it. I've certainly been through worse. So that's how I ended up deciding to give Wegovy a try.
And Jody, how do you sort of approach, I assume many of your patients, like Laurie, have a lot of medical needs, right? You're sort of balancing cancer treatment and other medical problems that may be, but often are not related to the person's weight. So how do you think about how to balance that approach?
Right. So Laurie's case was especially interesting because it was multifaceted. There was definitely the finish line of needing to reach a certain weight in order to get a procedure done, which parenthetically, we've asked some questions about that, in terms of what motivates these cutoffs, which you hear, sometimes orthopedists say your BMI has to be X before we'll do it, a knee or a hip replacement, or you need to lose BMI 35 before we'll do this procedure for the lymphedema. And I trust that these are based on the physicians doing the procedures wanting to have the best outcomes. However, I'm not entirely positive how evidence-based they are. So I think a lot of patients end up feeling very frustrated and frankly stigmatized by this. So there was that whole aspect of it. So and of having this goal that she really had that we needed to try to get to. And then there were some complications, metabolic complications from being overweight that Laurie had, and was treated with other medications. So you put all that into the equation. So you're risk stratifying the obesity, and then you're also considering very important other life considerations or medical conditions that are not traditionally in that bucket of metabolic comorbidities. And then you have not that many tools in the toolbox, but still you need to give people the information. And some patients come in very convinced, I want this, right? It might be, I want phentermine, I want Wegovy, I want, they tell you what they want. And other patients just want to hear all the options. And so you go through them one by one and you explain the medications, you explain the side effects, you explain on average, what do the studies show in terms of weight loss. And from there, some patients decide right at the visit, I want to do this. Other patients say, okay, I'm going to take all that information, go home, think about it, and get back to you. And then you proceed from there.
Already, you're having to make so many calculations based on the patient's life and medical needs and priorities. And now we've got this shortage of so many of these medications. As you write in your first opinion essay, by trying to be thoughtful and offer personalized care, I feel like I am literally weighing one patient against another, which is just such an evocative image. So tell me a little bit about how navigating these drug shortages complicates your work with patients.
So to bring it home, to bring it right home to Laurie, so she started on Wegovy and she had a good response. Within the first 2 months, she had a good response. So green light to keep going, tolerating it okay. So side effects were manageable, response was good. And then there was the first round of shortages. So she, fell right into that situation. And so then we had to decide what to do next in terms of trying another medication. And Laurie, should I go on from here, or do you want to speak to? I guess maybe it would be interesting to hear from you. So all of a sudden, right, you're taking medication, you're having good response. It looks like we're heading towards that finish line, and then, oh, sorry, you can't get it anymore.
Yeah, I think I was on it for about 2 months. I had lost 10 pounds to begin with, and I thought, hey, this seems to be working all right. And I was on the lowest starter dose, and then there wasn't any more of it, or the next couple of titered doses. So I had to stop. And then those 10 pounds that I lost came creeping back, no matter what I did. So that was frustrating. It was a couple of months before we figured out what to do next. And the answer ended up being to start with Saxenda. And start with a low dose of Saxenda, which is the daily injectable. I started doing that. And I did that for several months. I forget exactly how long. I think it may have been like 4 or 5 months. And, titered up, a few times to get to the point at which it was a dose that was, I guess, equivalent to, the mid-tier dose of Wegovy. So that was the point at which those doses were available. It was all the starter doses that were in shortage and couldn't be found for love nor money. So being able to bridge over with Saxenda was definitely helpful. Though I did have some issues with the Saxenda itself, which is that I developed kind of an allergic reaction to them. So every time I would inject myself, a day or two later, this little sort of quarter-size welt would appear in the area where I'd injected myself. And so over the course of, say, a week, I would have, like 7 different spots on my abdomen where I was developing like a kind of round, red, itchy plaque. And I thought, this is not great, but I don't know what else to do. I took antihistamines and used anti-itching creams and just sort of dealt with it. I was grateful to be able to switch.
I mean, at any point were you thinking, like, why am I doing this, right? When you're sort of trying to find the Wegovy and then moving to this medication that's sort of less than ideal and giving you this terrible reaction. I mean, was there any point in which you thought, like, I can't do this anymore?
I didn't get to that point, but I did, honestly, I think, start to feel a little resentful that I'm being, in my mind, sort of forced to do this to myself in order to get access to a surgery, which I feel I should just be able to get, My left arm is about, well, it depends on the season. It kind of shrinks in the winter and expands in the summer with the heat, but anywhere from like 40 to 50% larger by volume than my right arm. And it's stage 2 lymphedema, which means that all the swelling that you see, it's no longer pooled lymph, it's fat hypertrophy. So it's not going away unless I have surgery. The surgery would first be debulking via liposuction. And then about a year later, they would decide whether they also need to do something like an auto transplant of a healthy lymph node from one part of your body to the affected part. So, one of the things that I think is especially almost cruel is that if you are larger to begin with, that increases your risk of developing lymphedema. And so, you feel like you're already at higher risk. You're forced to do this to save your life. And then you end up being treated with medication that makes you gain more weight, only to be told that, no, you are too fat to have this surgery, which would fix it for you. Honestly, I'm a little bitter about that.
Understandably, I would say. I mean, and Jody, this is something you touched on a bit in your essay as well, which is that the stigma around weight has this really sort of complicated but impactful interplay with the shortages. Can you tell us a little bit about how you think the stigma around weight is affecting, who can access these drugs?
I do want to actually add just a couple things to what Laurie said first, which is this is an interesting case where we used Saxenda because when we had the Wegovy shortage, we couldn't use Ozempic because it wasn't approved by insurance, because it's approved only for type 2 diabetes. Same molecule, right? Taking semaglutide, making progress, doesn't have diabetes, has everything that we've just talked about, can no longer get Wegovy. You can get Ozempic at the same dose that she was taking. However, insurance, so that we couldn't just switch her over. So there's that whole, I know that I did talk about that, this whole complicating piece of, okay, well, how do you decide when to prescribe Ozempic off label? So this would have been a case where, I would have, acknowledged to her that we're using off label, but really, that's about as much pause as I would take in terms of, well, what does that mean for, in terms of people with diabetes, maybe not getting it. This was all, kind of ahead of that curve, but still, I would have had no issue with that whatsoever, right? Taking a medication, continuing on the same molecule. So there was that. And the other thing I just want to point out, and now we'll switch over to the stigma. Laurie had asked the surgical team directly about this weight cutoff and expressed to me the frustration that she just mentioned. And then I, in turn, followed up and sent some emails to that team asking about this. What are the guidelines? Could I see the guidelines? How do you decide what to do? And I heard back from someone on the team, not the surgeon, saying this is the policy, and then, reached out again. And, just without making this personal with that surgeon, I want to say that it's very representative to what happens, as I said before. This happens so often. Patients go to see doctors for, you name the condition, and everyone is told, just lose weight, right? If you just lose weight, this will, whatever it is, will get better. And so sometimes that's not necessarily true. I would say that for the most part, these physicians who are saying this don't really do a deep dive into how is this person's health otherwise, right? So maybe their body weight is high, but maybe they don't have high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes. Maybe they're super physically active and actually they're in really good shape. And you are just looking at the weight and what you see in front of you, their size, and telling them that they need to lose weight. So I don't think that outside the field of medical weight management, people really take into account the overall health of a person. And I also think that when they say that, it can be insulting and discouraging and doesn't take into account the effect that comment will have also on the mental health of those patients.
Yeah, it definitely makes me feel like even if they're not saying to me, you are less than, it does feel that way. I'm sure they don't mean it to feel that way, but how could it not? And, honestly, I know quite a few people who purposely avoid going to doctors as much as they possibly can because they are so tired of being told that everything that they're experiencing is just because they're too fat and they just need to lose weight. It kills people.
Yep. And, I'm an obese woman, and, certainly going to a new doctor is just a terrifying moment because you don't know who's going to treat you kindly and who is not. So certainly
Yep.
something I very strongly identify with. One question I have that sort of connects to stigma is that, Jody, as you point out, the shortage of these GLP-1s means that people who need the medications because of existing problems are having difficulty accessing it. But at the same time, the sort of cultural explosion also seems to be prompting some people who may want it largely for cosmetic reasons, or maybe perfectly healthy but have sort of internalized messaging around weight, are making the shortage worse. Can you talk a little bit about that interplay? I mean, is it frustrating for you?
For me in my practice, I really can't think of, I don't know, maybe one. I could think of one patient who has actually said to me, I want to lose a few pounds for this, right? And like fill in the blank. It was for a wedding. That's, very common. But for the most part, the patients who come to see me are seeking help with weight loss for medical reasons. So I don't know whether or not, I don't know how much of this prescribing to people who are already lean or a little bit overweight. I don't know how much that's happening because my patient population is, entirely skewed against that. So I don't think that that's happening in academic medical centers. I think that it's happening in other places. I think it's happening. Certainly I've heard patients say to me that they know people who are getting this. So say during the shortage, people who I'm treating can't get it. And so they say, I know people going to these medi spas and you give them your credit card and you can get whatever you want. Or there are some medical practices where you pay a subscription fee and they seem to have supply as well. So, but I don't see any
or
of those.
Online pharmacy. Yeah, our colleagues at STAT have written about the online prescriptions, which seem to be huge here.
Yes. And then this very questionable compounded situation, which is really problematic as well. So, but those aren't the patients who I see. And so it's hard for me to know really what is the volume of that, or is it just, one of these things that has become it is happening, but it's been exaggerated in terms of the numbers.
Well, so we only have a few minutes left, but Laurie, I want to circle back to you and say sort of where are you right now? Are you currently using Wegovy? Have you been able to get your surgery? To the extent that you're comfortable, just like to know how you're doing.
Let's see. Well, I am still on the Wegovy. I have had further response to it. I did manage to re-lose that 10 pounds and some more, though it's extraordinarily slow going for me. I know people who have lost tremendous amounts of weight very quickly on that, and that isn't happening for me. I don't know if it's because I was on it and then had to stop and then restart, or if it's just that my personal, body and situation are working against me, or whatever it is. It could be for any reason, right? But I tend to sort of bounce up and down the same few pounds for a while, and then I lose a little more, and then I bounce around a couple of pounds up and down, and then if I'm lucky, I get a little more. So I guess I'm down about 15 pounds total, which is great. I'm happy for that. I would love it to be more, honestly, so that it could be unequivocally like, yes, you have met that target. Surgery for you. Hooray. So I am not there yet. However, I did finally get to have a bit of a leap forward in my treatment at the lymphatic center, in that in September, I was finally permitted to undergo 3 sets of imaging for my arm. And I do actually have finally, after it's been over 2 years since I first started pursuing this process, I will finally have an appointment with the surgeon at the beginning of November. So then we will see what happens.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a long slog.
If the surgery weren't a consideration, do you think you'd still be taking the Wegovy?
I don't know. I mean, I had been trying to lose weight before that, but like not in quite so kind of single focusedly a manner. And this is because I was told that if I would be able to lose some weight, it would lessen my risk of recurrence because my breast cancer was a hormone positive cancer and fat makes estrogen. So any weight that I can lose further decreases my risk. And I am high risk for recurrence. I had an oncotype score of 41. When that was tested, it was a high-grade cancer, and it had progressed to 8 lymph nodes. So I am very motivated to reduce my risk of recurrence, and I do a lot to try to further that goal. So, I mean, I would like to lose more weight, but I'm not sure, if it weren't for this, I'm not sure that I would have gone in this direction. I mean, maybe I would have eventually, but I definitely picked this because I was focused on the surgery.
And Jody, just to wrap up with you, what are you hopeful in terms of next steps with these GLP-1s? What do you want to see going forward besides a lack of shortage, of course?
What I would love to see actually is related to that other shortage that I mentioned, which is access. I mean, we really need to completely overhaul access to these medications. And so, of course, the manufacturing shortage is part of that equation. But if we take that away, with these need to be covered by public insurance. With new data coming out showing additional benefits, cardiovascular benefits, you can make the sound argument that on average, the best treatment for medical weight management, the best option out there for weight loss are these GLP-1 agonists. And so making them inaccessible to people because they have public insurance, Medicare, Medicaid, Mass Health, and also many private insurances, you are denying, you could say, as a category, gold standard treatments. Well, I mean, they're not covering weight loss medications, period. So, I mean, so if we just go, there's that, right? They don't cover weight loss medications, period. And many insurances don't cover the GLPs. So number one, making no weight loss medications available to people on public insurance is totally insane. And then private insurance companies not covering these medications and having patients have to go through these other either step therapy or just, some of the other medications, like they'll never get to take GLP-1s. They have to take something else, is just really discriminatory in many ways. If you look at, it's discriminatory to people with obesity as a disease, and it's discriminatory to the population of people who have public insurance and some of these private insurances.
Jody Dushay and Laurie Brunner, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the First Opinion podcast. It's produced by Teresa Gaffney. Alyssa Ambrose is the senior producer, and Rick Burke is our executive producer. Listeners, I want to hear from you. What First Opinion columns do you think would make great episodes of the podcast? And what topics should the column be taking on? You can email me at first.opinion@statnews.com. And, help a podcaster out. Please leave a review or rating on whatever platform you use to get your podcasts. Until next time, I'm Tori Bosch, and please don't keep your opinions to yourself.